At 8:42 a.m., inside a subway station in London, a man suddenly collapsed in the middle of the crowd. 10 seconds later, the first person was bitten. 5 minutes later, the entire station turned into chaos. Morning rush hour had begun in London. The city was alive with movement. Cars filled the streets, buses stopped at every corner, and thousands of commuters poured into the subway stations across the city. Inside the underground station near the financial district, the platform was crowded with people waiting for the next train. Office workers checked their watches impatiently. Students scrolled through their phones. A street musician played a quiet tune near the entrance. It was a normal weekday morning in London. Busy. Routine. Predictable. But near the far end of the platform, one man stood completely still. His clothes were wrinkled and damp. His breathing was heavy. And his eyes looked unfocused, as if he were struggling to stay conscious. Several commuters noticed him but quickly looked away. In a city this large, people often ignored strange behavior. No one wanted to get involved. But the man suddenly staggered forward. His body swayed like he was drunk. Then he collapsed onto the floor. The loud thud echoed across the platform. People nearby jumped back in surprise. "Hey!" someone shouted. A small crowd began forming around him. A young man wearing a gray jacket stepped forward. "Give him some space," he said calmly. He knelt beside the collapsed stranger. "Sir. Can you hear me?" The man on the floor twitched slightly. His fingers curled against the tile. The young man leaned closer. "Hey, are you okay?" Slowly, the stranger lifted his head. His face was pale. His eyes looked cloudy and distant. For a moment, it seemed like he was about to say something. But instead, he lunged forward. His teeth sank violently into the young man's arm. The scream that followed cut through the noise of the entire station. People froze in shock. The victim tried to pull away, but the attacker held on with terrifying strength. Blood began dripping onto the platform floor. "Get him off," someone shouted. 2 commuters rushed forward and grabbed the attacker. They pulled him backward. The bitten man fell to the ground, clutching his arm. Blood soaked through his sleeve. "What the hell was that?" a woman shouted. The attacker staggered to his feet again. But instead of running away, he simply stood there. Breathing heavily. His head tilted strangely to one side. Meanwhile, the bitten victim tried to stand. His face had gone pale. "Are you all right?" someone asked him. I think so," he said weakly. But his voice sounded wrong. His hands began shaking. Then his entire body tensed. "What's happening to him?" someone whispered. The man suddenly grabbed his head. His breathing became rapid and uneven. Sweat poured down his face. "Call an ambulance," a commuter shouted. A woman nearby pulled out her phone. But before she could dial, the victim screamed. His body jerked violently. He fell to his knees. His muscles tightened as if something inside him was fighting for control. 1 second passed. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. The crowd stepped back nervously. "Is he having a seizure?" someone asked. 5 seconds. The man slowly lifted his head. But his eyes were no longer normal. They looked pale. Cloudy. Empty. The victim slowly stood up. The crowd stared in confusion. "Are you okay?" someone asked carefully. The man didn't answer. Instead, he looked around the platform. His breathing was heavy. Almost animal-like. Then suddenly, he attacked the nearest person. The woman screamed as he tackled her to the ground. People began running. Panic spread instantly across the station. What is happening? Security guards rushed toward the chaos. But the situation was already spiraling out of control. The second victim was bitten. 10 seconds later, that victim attacked someone else. Within moments, the infection began spreading through the crowd. The subway platform turned into complete chaos. People ran toward the exits. Some tripped over each other. Others screamed for help. But the infected moved fast. Faster than anyone expected. Another person was bitten. 10 seconds later, another attacker. The infection spread like wildfire. Within minutes, dozens of commuters were either running for their lives or joining the growing number of infected. The subway train suddenly arrived at the platform. Its doors slid open. Passengers inside the train looked out in confusion. They saw people screaming, running, bleeding. And then the infected rushed inside the train. The doors closed behind them. The train began moving. And the outbreak left the station. Carried deeper into the city. 10 minutes later, a subway security officer watched the station cameras in horror. Every screen showed the same thing. People attacking each other. Blood on the floor. Bodies scattered across the platform. He grabbed the emergency phone. "Control, we have a serious situation down here." But before he could say anything else, one of the security cameras showed something even worse. The train that had just left the station had stopped inside the tunnel. And inside the train, every passenger was now screaming. The train leaving the station in London carried over 100 passengers. Most of them had no idea what had just happened on the platform. But within a few minutes, every person inside that train would be trapped with the infection. The subway train moved quickly through the dark tunnel beneath the city. Inside the train cars, the atmosphere was completely normal, at least for the first few seconds. Passengers stood shoulder to shoulder as the train accelerated away from the platform. Some held onto the metal rails above their heads. Others stared down at their phones, scrolling through morning news or replying to messages. A few people had managed to grab seats along the side of the train. Among them was a young woman named Sarah Collins, a university student heading to her morning class. She adjusted her headphones and leaned back in her seat, unaware that something terrible had just boarded the train. Near the center of the train car stood a man clutching his arm. It was the first victim from the platform. Blood still seeped through the sleeve of his jacket. Several passengers nearby had noticed the injury. "Hey, are you all right?" a middle-aged man asked. The injured commuter tried to respond, but his voice came out weak. I don't know what happened." His hands trembled slightly. Sarah glanced up from her phone and noticed the small crowd forming around him. Another passenger frowned. "You should sit down before you pass out." But the man suddenly leaned forward against the train pole. His breathing became heavier. Faster. Sweat formed across his forehead. A woman standing beside him took a step back. "Sir, you don't look well." The injured man didn't answer. Instead, he slowly lifted his head. His eyes looked wrong. Very wrong. They were pale and unfocused. Then his body suddenly jerked violently. Passengers nearby jumped back in alarm. "What's wrong with him?" someone asked nervously. The man dropped to his knees. His entire body began shaking. People stepped further away, unsure what to do. "Is he having a seizure?" a man whispered. Sarah removed her headphones completely now, watching the scene unfold. "Should someone call for help?" she asked. But before anyone could answer, the man lifted his head again. And this time, his eyes looked completely empty. He slowly stood up. The crowd around him stared in confusion. "Sir," the middle-aged man asked carefully. The injured passenger tilted his head slightly. His breathing sounded rough and animal-like. Then suddenly, he lunged forward. His teeth sank into the shoulder of the man who had been trying to help him. The victim screamed in agony. Panic erupted instantly inside the train car. What the hell? Passengers pushed backward, trying to escape the attack. But the train was packed. There was nowhere to run. Two commuters grabbed the attacker and tried to pull him away. They managed to shove him back against the train wall. The bitten man collapsed to the floor, clutching his shoulder. Blood soaked through his shirt. "Call the driver," someone shouted. A woman slammed the emergency button near the door. But the train continued moving through the dark tunnel. Meanwhile, the injured victim on the floor began breathing rapidly. His hands shook violently. His eyes widened. "Something's wrong with him," Sarah said. The bitten man grabbed the train seat beside him and struggled to stand. His entire body trembled uncontrollably. One passenger looked at his watch. That guy who bit him just turned like that in seconds. 5 seconds passed. The victim suddenly screamed. His body bent forward as if something inside him was tearing through his muscles. Passengers backed away in fear. "What's happening?" 7 seconds. The man slowly lifted his head. His eyes had changed. They were pale. Cloudy. Just like the first attacker. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. Then the second victim attacked. He jumped forward and grabbed the nearest passenger. The bite came quickly. A woman screamed as blood sprayed across the train floor. Within seconds, the infection spread again. Another victim. Another 10-second transformation. Another attacker. The confined train car turned into pure chaos. People pushed toward the doors, but the train was still moving through the tunnel. Some passengers tried to force open the doors. Others climbed onto seats, trying to avoid the infected. But the attackers moved quickly. Too quickly. Within minutes, nearly half the train had been infected. Sarah ran toward the far end of the train car with a small group of survivors. They slammed the connecting door shut behind them. One man locked it using the emergency latch. For a moment, the small group stood in silence, breathing heavily. The sounds from the other train car were horrifying. Screams. Growls. Bodies slamming against metal walls. Sarah looked around the small group of survivors. "How many people were on this train?" she asked. "Over 100, someone replied. Her face went pale. Then the train suddenly slowed. Everyone looked up. The lights flickered. The train screeched as it came to a stop inside the dark tunnel beneath London. For a moment, everything became quiet. Too quiet. Then something slammed against the locked door between the train cars. Bang! Everyone jumped. Another slam followed. Bang! The infected had reached the door. And they were trying to break through. Suddenly the train lights went completely dark. The tunnel swallowed the train in total darkness. Someone whispered nervously. "Why did the power go out?" Before anyone could answer, something scratched slowly across the door. Then a loud metallic crack echoed through the train. The door lock snapped. And in the darkness, dozens of glowing pale eyes appeared. Another loud crack echoed through the train. The door latch snapped halfway open. Pale fingers suddenly pushed through the gap. Everyone jumped back. "Move!" someone shouted. The survivors ran toward the front of the train. Their footsteps echoed across the metal floor. Behind them, the door finally burst open. The infected flooded into the carriage. Low growls filled the darkness. Sarah didn't dare look back. They reached the front door connecting to the driver's cabin. A man pulled the emergency handle. The door slid open. Inside the cabin, the train driver sat slumped over the control panel. Sarah stepped forward carefully. "Sir." The driver didn't move. One of the survivors leaned closer. "Check if he's alive." The man slowly reached out and touched the driver's shoulder. The body suddenly fell sideways. A deep bite mark covered the driver's neck. Blood stained the entire control panel. "He's dead," the man whispered. Fear spread across the group again. Behind them, the infected were getting closer. Their footsteps scraped across the floor. Sarah looked quickly around the small driver's cabin. Then she noticed something. A red emergency lever beside the control panel. "What does that do?" someone asked. The man with the extinguisher squinted at the label. "It says, Manual Tunnel Access Release." Sarah's eyes widened. "That means there's an exit somewhere in the tunnel. But it's probably locked." She grabbed the lever. "Not anymore." She pulled it down. Somewhere outside the train, a loud metallic clang echoed through the tunnel. A hidden emergency gate opened. Hope flickered among the survivors. "We have to go," Sarah said. "But the infected." Suddenly a low growl came from the doorway behind them. The infected had reached the driver's cabin. Their pale eyes glowed in the dim light. Blood covered their mouths. One of them stepped forward slowly. Then another. And another. There were at least 15 of them. Trapped inside the narrow train cabin. Sarah's voice trembled. "Run." The survivors climbed down from the train into the dark tunnel. Cold air rushed through the underground passage. The emergency gate stood open about 50 meters ahead. A small maintenance staircase led upward toward the surface. Freedom. They sprinted through the tunnel. Behind them, the infected jumped down from the train. Their footsteps echoed against the concrete walls. Fast. Too fast. Sarah could hear them gaining ground. Someone tripped behind her. A man screamed. The infected swarmed him instantly. The survivors kept running. No one looked back. They reached the metal staircase. One by one, they climbed upward as fast as they could. Sarah climbed last. Her arms burned with exhaustion. Her legs shook. But she kept climbing. At the top of the staircase, a heavy metal door led outside. A survivor pushed it open. Bright daylight flooded into the tunnel. They stumbled out onto a quiet street in London. Cars passed by normally. Pedestrians walked along the sidewalk. The city had no idea what was happening underground. Sarah collapsed onto the pavement, breathing heavily. "We made it," someone whispered. But then Sarah heard something that froze her blood. Sirens. Lots of them. Police cars raced down the street. Ambulances followed close behind. Helicopters circled overhead. And from somewhere in the distance, people were screaming. Sarah slowly turned toward a large digital billboard across the street. Breaking news flashed across the screen. Emergency alert, multiple violent attacks reported across London. Her heart sank. The infection hadn't stayed in the subway. It had already spread across the entire city. And the outbreak had only just begun. One officer grabbed a zombie from behind and forced it to the ground. But the creature twisted violently and bit the officer's arm. The officer screamed. His partner pulled out his weapon. "Get back." He fired one shot. The infected body dropped instantly. Everyone froze. No one had expected that. The officer stared at the fallen body in shock. "Did I just?" But then the bitten officer fell to his knees. His breathing became heavy. Fast. His partner looked at him nervously. "Hold on." Ambulance is coming. But the transformation had already begun. The officer screamed as his body convulsed. People nearby backed away in horror. Then his eyes opened again. Pale. Cloudy. Empty. And he attacked. The infection now spread through the streets like wildfire. Each bite created another infected. Each infected created more victims. And every victim turned within 10 seconds. Police radios across the city exploded with desperate calls. Multiple violent attacks in Camden. Emergency at a hospital in the East District. Units down. Officers down. The entire city was losing control. Sarah and the survivors ran down a side street, trying to escape the spreading chaos. Behind them, screams echoed across the main road. One of the survivors gasped. "We need somewhere safe." "Where do we go?" Another man answered quickly. "Police stations. Military bases. Anywhere with protection." But as they reached the next intersection, they saw something terrifying. A city bus had crashed into several parked cars. The front windshield was shattered. Inside the bus, passengers were attacking each other. Blood covered the windows. Some infected were already climbing out. More screams filled the street. Sarah stepped back slowly. "This whole city is collapsing," she whispered. Then a loud voice echoed through nearby loudspeakers. "Attention! This is an emergency alert." Everyone looked up. A police helicopter hovered above the street. The loudspeaker continued. "All citizens are advised to remain indoors immediately. Avoid contact with anyone displaying violent or unstable behavior." The helicopter circled once more. Then the voice continued. "Military containment procedures are now being deployed across London." Hope flickered among the survivors. "The military," someone said. "They'll stop this." But Sarah wasn't so sure. She looked around the chaotic streets. The infection had already spread too far. Too fast. Then suddenly, a loud explosion echoed in the distance. A massive cloud of smoke rose above the buildings. Another explosion followed. And another. The military had begun fighting back. But something felt terribly wrong. Suddenly, Sarah's phone vibrated. An emergency message appeared on every phone around them. The screen flashed with a government alert. "National emergency declared." Below the message were words that made Sarah's blood run cold. "All bridges and roads leaving London are now closed." The city wasn't being saved. It was being sealed. Everyone inside was now trapped with the outbreak. The government had made its decision. No one was allowed to leave London. The bridges were closed. The roads were blocked. The entire city had become a quarantine zone. The emergency alert message still glowed on every phone screen. Sarah stared at the words in disbelief. "All bridges and roads leaving the city are closed." A cold silence fell over the small group of survivors. One man shook his head slowly. "They're trapping us here." Another survivor whispered in shock. "No, they're trying to stop the infection from spreading." But Sarah understood what it really meant. The government had given up on saving the city. They were trying to protect the rest of the country. Even if it meant sacrificing everyone inside London. The sound of distant gunfire echoed through the streets. The military had begun fighting the infected. Helicopters roared overhead, moving toward the center of the city. Smoke rose from several blocks away. Fires had already started spreading through abandoned buildings and crashed vehicles. The once busy streets now looked like a battlefield. Cars were scattered across the road. Store windows were shattered. And the infected wandered through the chaos. Hunting. Sarah looked at the survivors around her. Only 6 people remained from the original group. Everyone else had been lost in the subway tunnel. "We need shelter," she said. "We won't survive out here." One of the survivors pointed toward a tall building across the street. An office tower. The entrance doors were slightly open. That building might still be empty. Sarah nodded. "Let's move." The group crossed the street carefully. Every step felt dangerous. Any corner could hide infected. Any sound could attract them. As they reached the office building entrance, Sarah slowly pushed the glass door open. The lobby inside was dark. Desks were abandoned. Computer screens flickered weakly. It looked like everyone had left in a hurry. "Clear," one survivor whispered. They quickly moved inside and locked the door behind them. For the first time since the outbreak began, the group finally had a moment to breathe. Sarah leaned against the wall, exhausted. Her mind replayed everything that had happened. The subway. The train. The tunnel. The streets. All of it had happened in less than 1 hour. "Does anyone know what caused this?" a survivor asked. No one answered. But then another man spoke quietly. "I heard something earlier, on the police radio." Everyone looked at him. "What did you hear?" He hesitated. "They said the virus wasn't natural." Sarah frowned. "What do you mean?" The man swallowed nervously. "They said it might have escaped from a laboratory." The room fell silent. A laboratory? If that was true, then someone had created this virus. Someone had caused the outbreak. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from outside the building. Everyone froze. Something slammed against the front door. Then another slam followed. Bang! The infected had found them. Through the glass entrance, pale figures began appearing outside. Dozens of them. Drawn by the noise. One survivor whispered in fear. "How many are out there?" Sarah slowly walked toward the lobby window. Her heart sank. More infected were emerging from the surrounding streets. 20. 30. Maybe more. The growing horde surrounded the building entrance. Their pale eyes stared through the glass. Then the first one slammed its body against the door. Bang! The glass cracked slightly. Another infected joined it. Then another. Soon dozens of them were throwing themselves against the entrance. The entire door shook violently. One survivor panicked. "They're going to break through." Sarah looked around the lobby desperately. There has to be another way out. Then she noticed something near the back wall. An emergency stairwell door. "Upstairs," she said. "Maybe the roof." The survivors quickly grabbed whatever they could use as weapons. Fire extinguishers. Metal rods. Broken chair legs. Then they ran toward the stairwell. Behind them, the glass door shattered. The infected poured into the lobby. Growls echoed through the dark building. Sarah slammed the stairwell door shut and locked it. For a moment, the group stood there in silence, breathing heavily. Then they began climbing the stairs toward the rooftop. Each step echoed through the empty building. Below them, the infected were already pounding against the stairwell door. After several exhausting minutes, the survivors finally reached the rooftop. Sarah pushed the door open. Cold night air rushed toward them. But the sight that greeted them was even more terrifying than the infected below. From the rooftop, they could see the entire skyline of London. The city was burning. Fires spread across multiple districts. Helicopters filled the sky. And far in the distance, attached to a construction elevator platform hanging along the building wall, hope flickered again. "That platform," she said. "It goes down the side of the building." The survivors rushed toward it. But the moment they reached the edge, Sarah froze. Below them, the street was filled with infected. Hundreds of them. There was no safe path. And above them, the bomber aircraft turned slowly across the sky. Missile bays opening. Time was running out. The rooftop door suddenly burst open. The infected flooded onto the rooftop. Growling. Hungry. Their pale eyes locked onto the survivors. Sarah grabbed the control lever of the construction platform. "Get on," she shouted. The survivors climbed onto the metal lift. The infected rushed forward. Sarah pulled the lever. The platform slowly began descending down the side of the building. One infected lunged forward, just missing the edge of the platform. The rooftop disappeared above them. But the sky suddenly lit up. Bright streaks of fire cut through the clouds. Missiles. Dozens of them. Falling toward London. As the missiles descended from the sky, Sarah looked down at the streets below. And that's when she saw something terrifying. Among the massive crowd of infected, one figure stood completely still. Watching the falling missiles. Watching the survivors. Its eyes looked different. Intelligent. Aware. Then it slowly smiled. The outbreak hadn't just created monsters. It had created something far worse. Something that could think.